Hello, welcome everyone in this video where I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we can digitize the three lines of defense with ServiceNow Integrated Risk Management. My name is Karel Jansen. I myself am responsible for one of the global centers of excellence within Platformation, our security and trust practice, which is basically one of the specialized practices where we have the mission to help our customers become more resilient, better protected, and highly effective with great ServiceNow solutions. I work with a team of dedicated specialists where we provide subject matter expertise to our customers in the domains of GRC or integrated risk management, but also cybersecurity, privacy, and business continuity management, of course, in line with the key product domains on the ServiceNow platform: integrated risk and security operations, business continuity, privacy. So today, a short agenda. I want to start with a fictive customer case that is looking to digitize the information security management system and their three lines of defense. We believe really our vision is based on the three lines of defense model. I'm going to tell a little bit about that. Then just shortly about the ServiceNow platform in a broader sense. So it's important to appreciate and to recognize that integrated risk management is a capability within the ServiceNow platform, but ServiceNow actually offers much more. It's a workflow platform, so we'll have a look at that and what that means. And then a bit of a deep dive on integrated risk, the product portfolio, after which we're going to look in the system in what how that looks like in reality. Okay, so a short fictive customer case, one that we, let's say, come across very often with the customers that we're working with. So many customers need to be compliant with a variety of standards depending on the industry, but ISO 27001, the information security, the leading information security standard, is something that applies virtually to all industries. And many customers come to us, how can we leverage ServiceNow to improve our information security management system? So this is a fictive case of such a customer. Complexity or the challenge, let's say, typically is that customers are working on a manual with a manual way of working, so relying on Word and Excel, which is leading to a scatteredness of risk and compliance data across the organization with different residing within different departments and teams, which is leading to an inability to actually monitor on a higher level in the organization, what is the posture of the risk and compliance status, let's say. Of course, this is leading also to inefficiencies. So second line of defense needing to chase people in the first line for certain control evidence, performing mitigating actions as part of as an outcome of certain risk assessments. And overall, this is leading to higher cost of compliance and information security with a higher risk of breaches and information securities. So two main questions. How can we mature? What is needed to mature the GRC function in a holistic sense? And how can ServiceNow support in that journey? So our vision, we base our approach and our methodology very much on the three lines of defense, which is also in line with the ServiceNow vision, where we need to first understand together with the customer, what kind of roles and responsibilities have you defined in your three lines of defense. And we're going to, of course, help there to see what things do need to improve there before we start looking at how should that be translated into a digital foundation. But the vision in the end is that we really realize the digital three lines of defense where, let's say, a collaboration happens through a single digital platform, which then helps us to remediate these, let's say, inefficiencies, that the lack of insight and reporting ability across risk and compliance data. So quickly on ServiceNow. So ServiceNow, as I mentioned, it's not one point solution or a collection of point solution. It's truly one enterprise-wide platform, which is a workflow platform. So the idea is that we, with our platform, are able to connect many different teams and functions across the organization. We have a state-of-the-art platform that integrates also with systems of record like SAP and Oracle and Salesforce, with very powerful core platform capabilities like our workflow engine, the skeleton of the platform, the CMDB, which in the context of information security is of course also a best practice and a foundation to start with a complete and accurate view of our IT landscape. And we provide user experiences through web. It's a SaaS-based platform, so born in a cloud platform. So we can interact through browser, but also we have our own mobile app, and we can integrate with solutions like Teams and Workplace. One additional quick slide on the platform view. This tries to summarize all of the different product areas. In blue is what we're going to look at today in much more detail, but we can see also that there were many other product capabilities towards different stakeholder domains in the organization. Like, for instance, IT service management, which really is the set of solutions, standardized workflows and capabilities to digitize the ITIL function, which in the context of information security is also very relevant, of course. Our incident and our change data, which are actually core requirements, for instance, in the ISO 27001 framework. We're collecting and consolidating already that process data into the platform, which we can use to, for instance, automate certain controls and control testing activities. So that's also where a lot of the value can be derived from. And other capabilities like ITOM to automate population of the CMDB, auto discovery, capabilities like security operations to integrate with vulnerability scanning solutions, which also again in the context of information security is very relevant. So DevOps capability to integrate with our CI/CD pipeline, again there to, for instance, automate the end-to-end IT change management landscape. Very relevant with HR and other capabilities. So it's important to recognize that it is truly one platform, one data model that allows us to connect a lot of different disciplines, which for an integrated risk solution is essential. Then let's have a look at the, let's say, product overview, the product portfolio of integrated risk management. Today we're going to look at some of the core building blocks: policy compliance, regulatory change, risk and audit, but we have a lot of other capabilities like business continuity management, privacy, and third-party risk management, which we can tell more about, will tell more about in the other videos in this series. Not for today. We're going to focus on, let's say, the core capabilities to digitize the 3 lines of defense. I'm going to skip through quickly here. So just a short view on policy and compliance and what do we cover there. A couple of the key functional areas. So policy and compliance is there as a foundation to start managing our authority documents. So for instance, the ISO 27001 framework, but also our company policies and how we translate those, how we map policies to regulatory frameworks, with our control libraries, of course, where we can start to assign and operationalize policies and controls towards the first line. And this is also very much where the strength lies in our platform. And of course, the ability to integrate our control landscape with other process areas, process domains, like, for instance, IT change management, but also other areas like HR onboarding processes, for instance. We can start tapping into the data that we're already managing in the platform to truly, let's say, come to a continuous control monitoring capability. Issue tracking, of course, which is an integral function that can be leveraged to track control issues, but also audit issues and perhaps risk issues across the solution. A quick view on risk management. So there again now, the ability to start managing our risk frameworks, where we can start to operationalize risks and risk assessments towards the first line. Risk identification on top of the organizational domains. So looking at certain applications, but also processes, an end-to-end life cycle to identify, assess, respond to risk and to mitigate risk. Risk events for an ability for the first line, for instance, to start to report certain events that may result in impact that need to be assessed by the second line. And again, our indicators and issues and remediations. Of course, a clear relation or a strong relation between policy compliance and risk, where we can start to apply certain policies to reduce risk areas and risk domains. All in a single platform. And finally, audit management, which really, let's say, is the capability to digitize the internal audit function, plan, execute audits, start to assign audit tasks or working papers, keep track of observations and issues, and finally produce an audit report for any stakeholder, internal, external, that may request this. Okay, then I'm going to switch to the demo. All right. Yes. Okay, and I'm going to start with a in the same order as we went through the capabilities in the presentation just now. So I'm going to start with a view from policy and compliance. And very important here, I will be starting with the perspective from the second line of defense. So the compliance officer logging into the system, start their day. This is what we would be looking at. Later on in the video, we're going to have a look also at what the user experience is for the first line of defense. That is a much more simplified, tailored, and easy to use user experience with self-service portal technology to really, let's say, limit the need for any training, simple to use self-service portal for people in the first line that typically do not require the type and the amount of functionality and overview as the second line of defense would require. So we're going to look at that later in the video. But right now, I'm going to take you through one of the first landing pages. So our compliance management landing page. We have one for risk as well and for audit as well. We start with this one. Later, I'm going to show you the other ones for risk and for the third line audit as well. As a starting point for compliance, this is what their landing page could look like. Important to also underline is that this is a highly configurable view. So ServiceNow is a flexible, configurable platform, and anything that we see here can be, let's say, altered to your specific needs. Everything that we show today is completely off the shelf, out of the box. So if you purchase the solution, this is what you get. But we have the ability to, we have a lot of configurability in what we're going to see today. So just a quick view on the solution, a landing page where I see a couple of things. I see a couple of pending tasks. I can click on those, of course. I have some approvals and certain things that are overdue. Currently, I don't have anything assigned to my group, but we can assign certain tasks in regards to risk, compliance, controls, audits to on an individual basis, but also on a group basis. On which, of course, it's all click through, so it's all interactive, which now shows me a list, for instance, of all the different task types, control assessments, control tests that are assigned to me. They are grouped also by state in the process. So certain items are in progress, require an approval, are new or overdue. So all interactive, and we can immediately see that at a glance, where is the work that is still on my table, on my plate, and how do I navigate through that? Just going back to the home screen, some visual graphical visualizations. So as an example, the first one is a view on our authority documents. So in ServiceNow, authority documents are external regulatory frameworks like ISO 27001, or for instance, COBIT, or any other type of framework that we need to comply with, we can manage in ServiceNow. We can upload these kinds of frameworks, create them ourselves, right? We can upload them with Excel or just create something from scratch in the system, but we can also consume this kind of data and these kinds of libraries from external content providers, so we don't have to maintain those ourselves, right? So we can, for instance, automatically consume this kind of data, these library packages from the Unified Compliance Framework to have that, let's say, automated fully. I can see at a glance what the compliance posture is of the authority documents, a regulatory framework landscape, so to speak. So I see I have a total of 11 authority documents that I need to comply with, for which a number of them are, let's say, deemed compliant, and or a certain percentage of requirements we are meeting, but not to everything. And also on a framework level, I can see what the compliance score is, for instance, for my ISO 27001 framework. So a number of controls will have been operationalized that are mapping to requirements of the ISO framework. And some of them are effectively implemented, but not all. And that's what is being visualized, represented here at a glance. We see some issues that are pending that are related in some way to this framework or to controls related to this framework. I can start drilling down, but first I want to just give you a brief view on, let's say, the other key metrics and information, reports that we are seeing in this page. Next to our authority documents, we have our policies. And in ServiceNow, we have a policy is basically an internal company policy. The policy follows a certain life cycle. So we draft the policy, we assign approvers and reviewers to it, we start to add content, we approve the policy, after which we can distribute the policy, which can then be, for instance, let's say, accessed through, again, a self-service portal for all the employees. We can map our policies to our authority documents. So if I, for instance, look at our change management policy, I see that has a rather low compliance score. I can open that up. And the first thing that I would see then is a quick view with some more detailed information on what's happening with this policy and how this is being implemented in the organization. I can see it is at in a published state currently, so that means that content has been added, a review has been performed, an approval has been done, which we can actually start to visualize also in the detailed information. We have a certain owner, for instance, and in our details tab, we will also be able to see our activity trail, so who contributed here, who the approvers are, and what kind of reviewers have been assigned to complete this the life cycle of this policy. I can scroll down a little bit further where I can see overall compliance percentage. Also, let's say to what kind of entities. So I'll tell a little bit more about that, but those are essentially organizational domains, can be systems, it can be processes, it can be departments, and we can see how this policy is mapping with our organizational structure and to what degree that the controls are being implemented there effectively. On the right-hand side, I see also very important, what frameworks are mapped with this policy. So a change management policy can have controls or requirements that are mapped to different kind of frameworks like COBIT, like ISO 27001. We can see that at a glance over here. Additionally, we see very important. A policy is essentially still a kind of a document, an instruction. What we are able to do in ServiceNow is not only manage the policy and the life cycle, but we can start to define and operationalize really the control libraries and the controls that are mapped to our policies, and start to assign those to our first line that we can start tracking also. So we can see that we have a total of 889 controls that have been generated or operationalized from the content, the control libraries, which are reflected actually here in our related list with control objectives. And we see that a certain percentage, let's say, of the controls that are mapped with this policy are compliant or less compliant. Going a bit further, yeah, we can also see, let's say, more information about about our policy exceptions, which is a dedicated workflow. Our issues that are perhaps resulting from failed controls, and much more information. Going back quickly to my central page again, to my homepage. I also have a view on authority documents, policies. I also have a view on entities. So the entities in ServiceNow are an important concept. They are not legal entities. Entities represent essentially any type of organizational asset or domain. So could be a system, could be a process, let's say, could be technology indeed. So we can not only monitor compliance against frameworks, regulatory compliance, policy compliance, internal, but we can also start to measure that against the organizational structure, to understand where in the organization do we have certain control failures and issues that may be impacting the regulatory landscape, for instance. Scrolling down a little bit, I have more information about control assurance, so certain control tests that are ongoing in, for instance, certain audit engagements. I see something about my indicators. So my indicators, these are really, this is really where the power of the platform also is visualized. So the indicator is essentially the continuous control monitoring capability, which allows us to tap into certain process data, for instance, in change management data or in onboarding process data that we are already tracking in our workflows in the other products that we looked at, and thereby eliminating the need for the second line of defense to chase constantly people in the first line and gather evidence. We have our automated indicators to do that for us, where we can see at a glance in the system, if there's anything going on, if a compliance violation is automatically detected in the process data, then we can start to see that here. Control assessments, so really, let's say the first step in the control life cycle. More details on that later also. And below we have more information about our issues. There's an integral part of the solution. Issues can be tracked on controls, but also on certain risks and audits. We have a dedicated workflow for acknowledgement campaigns, which can again be used to have the user community or the employee community commit or indicate that they are acknowledging our policies. And we have a dedicated workflow for policy exceptions, which allows the employees to request certain policy exceptions in case there is a need for that, for instance. In case of a system go live or a new product where more flexibility in the procedures is needed. Finally, regulatory change management. That is, we have a dedicated pane for that also, which we're looking at over here. Regulatory change management is a dedicated workflow where we can report on to keep track of regulatory changes. So, for instance, if within the ISO 27K framework, a change is applied. We are integrating with such a third-party content provider. We get automatically a task and a workflow to assess the impact across the organization, and we can start to monitor that with a single pane of glass here as well. So certain alerts about upcoming regulatory changes, ongoing changes and change tasks. What's the status there? You know, can keep track of that, can click on that. Certain information about the import of new changes and certain the impacted entities. So this is telling us immediately at a glance, you know, new regulatory updates or changes. How is it affecting the let's say policy setup across the organization? Where are certain entities impacted? With more data about that. We looked at the task pane already. Let's have a quick look on our issues overview. A dedicated pane of glass for my issues. So that's an integral workflow connected to different potential items or other workflows. We can, in a single pane of glass, keep track of that easily. We can filter on certain entities. We can create issues ad hoc, and we can see, let's say, what's the status of tasks related to certain issues. Finally, administration pane. Here, basically, all the menu items for the compliance manager available. We can make our own custom lists. We can filter on any type of, let's say, list is what we're looking at here. So we see our total overview of authority documents, our policies, the entities, everything, let's say, bundled together. Maybe it's worthwhile to just quickly, let's say, show a couple of neat tricks and tips. So we can apply all sorts of filters on these lists. As an example, let's say I would want to see now only the authority documents that have the type international or national standard. I could say, give me show matching, and then it filters the list dynamically. I can start to export any kind of list to Excel or to PDF, and I can do that with my authority documents, with my controls, with my policies, anything that I want. So a very flexible system, very powerful reporting capabilities to drill down and deep dive into the data from all different angles. And we're looking at our landing page again with the authority documents, our policies, and finally had a view of our entities. So this really shows at a glance again that compliance posture against the organizational domains, so to speak. So for this, I'm just going to go and I'm going to view all of my entities. So give me the full list. And here I see I have a total of 171 entities, which are, distributed over a couple of pages. Let me now pick a specific example. I'm going to pick the example of SAP financials. I'm going to open up this particular entity where I already see my compliance score in the list. So it also has a risk rating because we have done certain risk assessments against this particular entity. Let me open up that specific entity to deep dive a little bit further into, how is the compliance posture breakdown? How can we visualize that against this particular entity? So total compliance percentage, but of course this entity is also part of a hierarchy perhaps. And this is also what we can start to visualize over here immediately. So we have a certain downstream hierarchy. So this SAP financials item is dependent on certain infrastructure elements, for instance. What I really like also about, let's say, this view is that we can also visualize this in a even more, let's say, user-friendly way. Where what I've now done is I've taken the 360 view, and we can now see at the heart here we have the SAP financials entity, and we can see immediately which, let's say, elements are related to this this core, let's say, CMDB item. I can, for instance, see which elements or business services are dependent on this entity. And in that same way, I can also see what kind of downstream elements are there on which this entity is depending. I can see I have 124 controls that are, let's say, linked to this entity or any downstream entities. And in that same way, I can also see, what kind of risks are related to which, let's say, engagements is this entity a part of, etc., etc. So another easy way to visualize things. Going back to the previous view, again here on my entity level, I can also see, for instance, which kinds of risks are related, which kinds of risks are associated to this SAP financials component, and also, of course, which downstream controls do I have. And in this view, it does not only show, let's say, the controls that are immediately linked to this particular entity, but also actually to downstream entities. So here I can see the entity to which a control is linked. And if I click now here on, for instance, show me the directly related entities, it shows only the directly related controls. It shows me a list of only controls related to this and this entity only, and not also the downstream entities. All right, so I think we went through quite a few of the highlights of the core functionalities in policy and compliance. We have not seen everything. If you have any specific questions around this, you are very welcome to contact us for me to elaborate further on anything that you are interested in. For now, I wanted to quickly switch to the risk management, let's say, landing page. So we've been looking at mostly compliance related data. What I also wanted to do now is to give you a bit of an impression still for second line of defense, but then our risk management landing page. So I'm going to quickly switch to another view. Let's go to our risk workspace. Yes. And then I'm going to enlarge my screen again. Great. All right. So similarly to the compliance workspace, we have a dedicated landing page for risk. Again, here it's fully flexible and configurable. We can also merge basically the two, but this is what you get out of the box, off the shelf. This is all part of the suite. Here again, how we see a landing page, but immediately it's much more, let's say, centered around risk-related data, whereas we have been looking previously at it from a more of a compliance perspective. What I can see here are a couple of visualizations again. So I see certain risks per category, project, operational, IT. And of course, I see a key risk heat map. As explained, I think in the beginning of the presentation, really one of the core strengths of our risk application is that we are able to accommodate different types of heat maps, different configurations of heat maps. And this is crucial to, in the end, really achieve an integrated risk platform, because inherently, or let's say fundamentally, an enterprise or an IT risk heat map looks different than an operational risk heat map, because we are looking at the different impact factors in our risk assessment. And so this is actually what we can now immediately start to visualize here. I've selected now my risk methodology, IT risk assessment, but I have other risk methodologies. I also have one, for instance, for operational risk. And here we can start to see, because we're looking at fundamentally different risk assessment data where we have assessed on different impact factors, we can also see that that is reflected within the configuration of the heat map and into the risk breakdown. So a flexible platform to really assess, monitor, manage all, let's say, different risk domains or across the risk universe in our organization. And yeah, I have to say I really like how the usability, let's say, lets you easily navigate through this and at a glance really see, where are, let's say, my points of attention. Where do I need to look at from an enterprise risk perspective, from an operational risk perspective? So whether you're sitting with the board of directors or with your privacy team or with your chief information security officer, all the data is here. One single pane of glass for risk management. Additionally, we of course have our quick actions here as well, so we can immediately start to initiate certain risk assessments. We can schedule them. We can start to update our risk library with risk statements. We can create risk events as a second line of defense owner, let's say, and start to manage, also add controls to reduce inherent or to reduce residual risk scores. With again, of course, open tasks, group tasks, and if we scroll down a little bit further, we get more visualizations on the highest risks, certain risk tasks, remediation tasks, and mitigation tasks that are assigned across the organization. Also in regards to controls that are mitigating certain key risks, we can see to what degree that is going well or not. And we also have certain trend analysis reports here, like our risk events. Risk events are similar to issues or incidents, can be reported by, for instance, first line of defense users, or it can be initiated by any other workflow. So, for instance, a particular IT incident in which possibly we have personal identifiable information that is being breached. This could be, let's say, a trigger point for a risk event where different, let's say, stakeholders need to be involved, like the privacy team, the security team, to start to assess what are we dealing with here, and what does this mean, what kind of mitigating and remediating actions do we need to take right now, but also towards the future. How is this impacting our risk posture? Again, a view on issues, of course, where, yeah, as I mentioned, is an integral part. They are linked to, can be linked to different components, let's say, in the application to really visualize across the organization also what's going on. Right, so let's deep dive a little bit further on what the risk assessment lifecycle looks like from, remember, still a second line of defense. We're going to go over to first line of defense perspective in a little bit. So bear with me. What I want to show you just quickly now is, let's go actually to my open pane of tasks, right? So I have quite a number of things assigned to me. I have control attestations and other items. I want to look at my risk assessments. I see here that I have 5 risk assessments that are actually assigned to me right now as a second line of defense user. And I see that different risk assessments are in a different state of the risk assessment cycle. So I'm in a certain I'm in a residual assessment state for my risk assessment for ServiceNow, and I have a couple of other ones ongoing. Let's have a look at the first one. So we're doing actually a risk assessment for ServiceNow as a platform. And if I open that, I see it's assigned to. I've changed my user now quickly to Maximilian. So I'm impersonating another user, and we can see actually at a glance now where we are in terms of this this risk assessment, where we go through a couple of stages, and we've completed the inherent assessment and the control assessment, and now we are to perform the residual assessment, after which an approval will be triggered or can be triggered towards maybe my line manager, for instance. Let's resume the assessment to have a look at that, and we can see that it's quite, let's say, self-intuitive with some let's say with some easy to use panes. So I can also click back into the different stages. So it started with an inherent assessment, where we concluded with a moderate impact and a possible score on likelihood, after which we conducted our control assessment, in which we saw that there was one control that was mitigating this particular risk. We had an effective result on that, which now results into automatically a low-level residual score, so very low. We had a moderate score on the inherent assessment with an effective control assessment, which now results in a low score for the residual assessment. Please keep in mind that anything, let's say, in terms of types of impact factors and how we configure this risk assessment is really, let's say, flexible. So we can also choose to not have any control assessment step for certain risk methodologies. That's all quite flexible. I can override the computed residual risk score, or I can even say it's not applicable in its entirety. After which I can save the assessment, and I can start to define a risk assessment response, which is, let's say, the next step in the in defining the risk response. We can basically, there are 4 options based on best practice. We can accept, avoid, mitigate, and or transfer a risk. Which will trigger a certain action unless we decide to accept, which will actually trigger an additional approval, because that's a business requires a business acceptance and justifications. The avoidance, mitigation, and transfer will trigger basically risk response tasks, which will be assigned to which can be assigned to the right owners. So let's, in this case, choose to mitigate the risk. I'm going to confirm it, and this triggers now a risk response task that actually can be, we can add more tasks even, and I can open up the task to see it's assigned now by default to me, but I can also reassign it to somebody. And once this kind of task is triggered, the person in the first line will, or the person to whom it is assigned, will receive an email notification, so that also people that are not interacting on a daily basis with the platform, we can, let's say, we are ensuring that they are well informed. And that actually leads me to the next, let's say, phase in this demonstration. Because so far, as mentioned, we've constantly been looking at the perspective from the second line of defense. What I want to do now is just give you an impression of what does the user experience look like for the first line of defense. So how are we using the platform and specifically the self-service portal technology and capabilities to really bridge the gap between second line of defense and first line of defense, and how are we making this as the collaboration as smooth as possible. And what I did now is I switched my window, and what we're looking at now is a very basic version of the employee self-service center, which really represents the self-service portal, which is used in any organization that is working with ServiceNow. This is a very basic, plain version, let's say, an out-of-the-box version. But here again, we have really the flexibility to customize, to add the branding of the company, to add more items here. This is a very basic one, but the idea is, of course, that to give you an impression of the simplicity and the usability for the first line of defense, right? As a first line of defense, typical first line of defense individuals, so people in the business, the application owners, the process owners, we cannot expect these individuals that are not going to work on a day-to-day basis with the ServiceNow in the GRC program or in the integrated risk program. We cannot expect these individuals to understand the full-fledged of the application. So it needs to be a simple, self-intuitive user interface, and that's what we're looking at here. So we have just a couple of options, a couple of, let's say, items in this basic version. where we can, for instance, have a look at at some of our open tasks. So if I click on my GRC tasks, I will move to a simple user-friendly view with some of my to-dos. So I see that I have 18 to-dos with a couple of overdue tasks. I have some new tasks, and I have a number of related sources, so I can also initiate certain requests. So you can see that the view here is actually much more simplified. If I click on my without any distractions, let's say, and if I click on my open tasks, I do get into a similar, let's say, similar view, but with less distractions, much more straightforward. And here again, we can see a number of the tasks that for me as a first line of defense user are pending. So again, some of the risk assessments, I'm still, let's say, that same user as I was, but now I basically logged in through the self-service portal. And I can see I have a similar overview, but just with less distractions. So I think it's also very important to underline again, whenever a certain task is assigned to somebody in the first line, and not only will we expect them to proactively go to their self-service portal, but we can also, of course, have email notifications or push notifications within, for instance, a ServiceNow app, or within an email within an email notification, to, let's say, engage with people and draw them into the platform and into the self-service portal, where they will be able to easily, let's say, review any item that's pending for them. Maybe an additional item to look at also from the first line is, for instance, a control attestation. So where we looked in policy and compliance at the control life cycle, and the first step is that control self-assessment. For the first line of defense, this is what they will be looking at. Just a simple overview with some control attestation that is pending their action. Where they can, for instance, we have a GRC attestation for our SAP financial system, and I can easily click on that, and it is very self-intuitive, and it guides me through the let's say the steps, and it tells me what is expected from me in terms of information. And so here, for instance, I have a control for my SAP financials entity, for which I am responsible then as an owner. And I am required to indicate whether the control is effectively implemented. And if I say yes, then the system is expecting me to upload some evidence. And if I say no, we will get a failure on the control. So let's say I am at this point not able to commit to this control. So I will submit that. This will trigger now an issue, which is now again visualized in the dashboards and in the reports that we've been looking at in the previous let's say steps of this demonstration. What also may be interesting to see, we have some popular topics overview. For instance, risk and compliance. And here really as a first line of defense user, I can also start to report certain things, to proactively engage with my second line. So for instance, those policy exceptions, I can easily, let's say, request a policy exception here through my self-service portal. In the example of an application that I'm responsible for that is going through a large upgrade in this period, I will not be able to comply with certain privileged user access controls, because we need to give some additional people access to production. So here, for instance, I can just easily initiate the policy exception review process with a basic form, where I indicate, what this is about, what control objective this exception is applicable to, or what policy. I can add some people to the watch list, and I can give more information. And important again to underline that everything that you see here is very flexible, so we can fully, let's say, configure these kinds of forms, of course. I can report my issues also here proactively as a first line user, as well as the risk events that can also be triggered from different sources. Yeah, and then of course, once I request certain things, I can also actually visualize the requests, the things that I have created myself, or I have a simple basic overview where I can filter on a little bit as well. As you can see, a much more, let's say, intuitive, simplified user experience for the first line of defense, which really is what we believe also the power of the platform. And we can really bridge that gap between the second line and the first line of defense, where second line is in that coordinating role and needs to oversee the GRC program and can easily, in a user-friendly way, engage with the people in the first line. Right, so we are going to finish off by having a quick view on the final persona, the third line of defense persona. So we're looking now at another landing page for audit. So an internal audit manager would start their day and would come and land on this kind of a page. Similarly to the experience for the second line of defense, compliance or risk officers for audit, we also have a dedicated landing page in which we can again see visualizations of the audit universe across the organization, where I have a number of tasks pending in regards to the ongoing audits. I have my timeline in which I can also quickly at a glance see what kind of audits have been planned, let's say, for the coming year and which ones are ongoing. I have information about, in a bit more granularity, about ongoing engagements that are overdue, and even, let's say, a visualization of resources and budget in regards to my my audit resources. Again, panes for open tasks in regards to the audit universe. And I can keep track of certain tasks, of observations, of issues resulting from my ongoing or previous or historic audit engagements. And view with more detailed information on certain open audits. Yeah, and again, let's say single panes of glass for issues, for tasks, and a detailed administration tab. If I now click on, for instance, let's pick an example. Audit engagement. I'm going to actually go to my detailed administration tab. Let's have a look at all of the engagements where we see that we have quite a few, let's say, ongoing. I'm going to pick an example one. For instance, our NIST cybersecurity audit engagement. Let's open that one up, and here then we will see some more visualizations on the state of this audit. We have, again, in our overview, a life cycle or a workflow. So where we are now in the validate and plan state, and we see a status on the specific timeline for this audit engagement and some of the milestones that have been defined. We can see at a glance the overview. So what kind of authoritative frameworks, let's say, are applicable? What regulations are we touching upon with this audit engagement? How is it related to our policies? And much more information. I think the key understanding in regards to audit management and the real power is, of course, that all of the data that we consolidate with this first and second line of defense, with our risks and controls universe that we've been going through, we rely upon that data to automatically scope, plan, and execute our audit engagements. By selecting, let's say, the organizational scope, our entities, automatically the associated controls to these entities will be plotted into the audit engagement, from which we start to derive audit tasks, which essentially resemble the traditional working papers. The audit tasks will be assigned to people in the organization, again, a workflow on its own. So if we open up an example task, for instance, then again, we will see here a particular workflow For the first line of defense people that are involved, they will have an overview of their ongoing audit tasks, of course, with some detailed information here as well, of course. And audit task will be, of course, linked to a particular control, to an audit, so we can report, let's say, across the board and make breakdowns in any way that we want. Of course, our observations are listed here. And once I conclude my audit, I will have the ability here to produce a PDF report that lists also already, that lists all my issues and my observations, where I can also tailor this kind of template report based on anything that we require. I think we went through a lot of information during this demonstration. There is actually much more to talk about in the next series of these videos. We'll be looking also in a little bit more detail to, for instance, business continuity and privacy and cybersecurity. But for now, I wanted to conclude here, and thank you very much for your attention. The marketing team of Platformation will make sure that whenever there are any questions, the right contact details will be listed in this video. I would like to thank you so much for watching.